One of the things that I've been thinking about is how we spend our time each week. And I'm wondering if you have ever wondered how many hours in your week are spent doing different things, like maybe cleaning your teeth or doing your hair or, I don't know. Well, let's see. It's actually a popular question to ask. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, multiple, widely read newspapers, a bunch of people ask this question: how do we spend our time? And I've grabbed the Australian data. It's pretty similar for New Zealand, and actually it's fairly similar across most OECD nations. It's quite interesting to take a look. Now, what I'm going to share are actually averages. Only averages. Your gender, your age, all have an impact. But let's take a look at the averages. And we'll start with sleeping. On average, we sleep about 7 hours a night. That's 49 hours of sleeping a week. And we, on average, spend about 40 hours working, studying in Australia, and we spend about 5 hours commuting to work. And then we spend up to 28 hours doing all the stuff, all the cooking, cleaning, shopping, gardening, caring for children, all those sorts of things, spending time looking after the home. The 17 to 28 hours in taking care of all the stuff. Then there's actually, really surprisingly, there's 20 hours on what you might call leisure. So that's grabbing a coffee, exercising, reading a book, eating with friends, spending time with family. 20 hours of leisure. But that doesn't include, are you ready? 18 hours a week watching the TV. Can you believe it? 18 hours a week watching the TV and 6 to 12 hours on social media. Now, we actually spend an average of 35 hours a week on our phones. But that can be on the phone for work, that can be looking up a website, that can be even paying bills. 6 to 12 hours social media, a total of about 35 hours on our phones a week. And for those of us who are Jesus followers and are regularly involved with a faith community, there's probably 2 hours on the weekend where we gather, either on a Saturday or a Sunday, with our faith community. Now, does that look like your week? When we have a look at the graph, it kind of, looks a bit like this. See a tiny little slice of the pie for church and all the other around. Funnily enough, when we have this conversation around intergenerational ministry, we seem to be very focused on that tiny little slice of the pie, that 2 hours. Now, it makes sense in many ways because that's actually the one time when most of us are in the one spot. So, if you're going to try and hit the target, you want to go for when most people are there. Now, when we think about the church and its forms and its functions and what it does, there's this often quoted verse. I'm sure know it. It's from Acts 2, verse 42. And it says, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. I don't know about you, but for me, the thing that stands out is all the ands. Did you see them? Here it is again, but with all the ands highlighted. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. And so I've been wondering, when do we do all the ands? And if we do them, what does it look like? I reckon we do the ands at our weekend gathering. The apostles' teaching, that's easy. That's the sermon or the kids program. The and fellowship, that's morning tea. The and sharing meals, including the Lord's Supper, that's obvious. We have communion or the Eucharist or whatever it's called in your tradition. And we have morning tea and we eat then, so that's like a meal. Well, very occasionally we might have lunch or dinner with the service, just, a couple of times a year maybe. And to prayer, we pray in the service. So we've covered the teaching and to fellowship and to sharing meals and to prayer. Done it. We are the church. But I feel like everything happens around the weekend gathering, not just those ands from verse 42. But have you noticed when volunteer meetings seem to happen these days? Before or after the service? We know the teaching and learning, that's, the sermon or the kids program. The friendship, the hanging out. It's all at morning tea. The serving, where we serve one another. Well, most people serve to make that weekend gathering happen. So I guess it's easy to come to the conclusion that the best place to work on being intergenerational is the weekend gathering space. That's when we're all there. That's when we do all the things that the church is meant to do. But you know what? The ship is turning really slowly. And people have deeply held views and traditions about what weekend gatherings should look like. Now, personally, I'm actually really passionate about intergenerational worship and celebration and Bible engagement, and I would choose that over a traditional sermon and sing-along any day. But I'm thinking that rather than just concentrating on that little slice of pie, there might be other places we could put our energy. The other 166 hours of the week. I think the reason we focus on that 2 hours, it's the only time we have that actually overlaps, other than sleep. The rest of our weeks actually look really different from one another. We all eat dinner at different times. We get home from work and school at different times. We have different activities on different days. My son's in an orchestra on Thursday. You've got squash on Tuesday. We all have our own unique timetable. And so I think that as we put all our energy to forming intergenerational community into that 2 hours, which actually lines up, to me that seems like TV delivery in a Netflix world. You can only access this when it's programmed, rather than any time of the week. I reckon there's 2 ways ahead, and it's all to do with this 166 hours. So on the Intergenerate website, on the Useful Links tab, was a link to a handout, and it looks like this. And I want to give you a couple of minutes. There's a bunch of baskets, and you can draw extras in. And if we were together, actually we'd have physical baskets and we'd move them around together and we'd actually do something with them. But you'll have to go for the drawing type, the one-dimensional type. So these baskets, they're all the regular non-Sunday, non-Sabbath programs and ministry your church has. Perhaps it's small groups, perhaps it's kids club, perhaps it's youth group, or a food bank, or a homework club. Whatever it is that's unique to your community, the ministries, the programs that happen at ABC Church, where you're from. One thing to note to figure out which baskets you're going to put things is for something to go in the basket on that intergenerational side of the page, it needs to have more than one generation present and contributing. For example, well, let's say a youth group. There might be two generations present. There's the teenagers and there's the late 20s, early 30s who are there as well leading the program. But the question is there actually giving and receiving of ministry? Is there mutual leadership and collaboration between those generations? If it's a yes, then it goes on the intergenerational side of the page. Or maybe it's that those adults are serving those young people. They provide a space for them. They're sharing the good news and joy of life with them. And it's a gift of ministry to those young people. Brilliant. And put it on the other side in the baskets. So take some time. There'll be some music. Write on the baskets. Write on your sheet what happens during the week. Put a note of which generations are currently present on that basket. Just make some notes about your faith community and its ministries and programs that happen other than the weekend. I guess if you're anything like me, if you've been hanging out in this intergenerational space or thinking for a while, or even if just having been here yesterday, you probably are wanting to move some of those baskets that are on the modern church side across to the intergenerational side. I'm wondering what some of those baskets are that you want to bring across. It's been said before, and let me say it again, it really is okay for there to be age-specific or group-specific ministries. Not every single program has to be intergenerational. But there are some baskets you will want to adapt. There may be new baskets you want to create. And there might even be baskets that you want to stop altogether. You know, really the biggest difference is that mostly the ministry and programs that are on that modern church side that have more than one generation present, ministries where those different generations are together, they actually experience the ministry in two ways. The ministry is either something that they are doing for someone else in another generation, or it's ministry they are receiving from someone else in another generation. But if they're over on the other side of the page, on the intergenerational side of the page, they'll actually be ministries that are for, with, and from. That for and from is still there, except it's for and from everyone. It's for everybody and it's from everyone. And it's also with. There's this alongsideness. So I'm wondering, what will it take to move some of those programs across the page, and how might you get there? Really, to move things, it's about being intentional, exactly as someone said. Being intentional with current things. It's recognising the landmarks so you'll know when you got there. There's some values on the Intergenerate Australia website. It talks about collaborative leadership and mutual relationships. There's all these different values. Well, integrating some of those values into the ministry, that whole for, with, from, if you just spend time thinking about, does everybody here get to serve someone and receive from someone? Do we do this together collaboratively? Needing to celebrate the wins, getting others on board, sharing the vision, not doing it alone. Basically, it's a mindset that we bring to programs. It's a way of thinking and structuring things. Need to be careful with our planning. We need the right people there, a team of people there, and it can definitely be done. You can adapt current programs. Sometimes it's much easier to adapt what's currently there, just a little tweak here and a little tweak there, and over time it just looks different. And sometimes you'll need to start something new. But I actually want to suggest a second way. So we have all the programs and we can adjust, adapt, recreate. But I want to suggest there are some things that happen and they're actually shaping, they're actually the most memorable thing, that they're the things we talk about. They make up our community's story. And they don't happen weekly, and sometimes they don't even happen annually, but they add up over time. They are part of our story. I asked my kids, they are from 19 down to 13, our church, what are the things that you remember most about when generations have been together? Well, here's a few of the things they said. They talked about the camping trip with 5 or 6 families where it was freezing cold and all the riding in the sky with the sparklers. They talked about the fundraising for an international mission agency that we did as a bike ride, and there were people from all generations together riding on their bikes fundraising. They talked about the Christmas carols that we've done in the park, and there's been all of us together making it happen, giving out the candles, all of that. But they also talked about Christmas breakfast. So our church has a tradition of having breakfast together for Christmas. And Christmas Eve is spent with a bunch of us, not the whole church, just a bunch of us, getting together to decorate. Well, for so many kids, that is a story of importance to them. Not the breakfast, the tradition of together creating something beautiful for the community to come together on Christmas Day. They talked about the soccer game after church on a Sunday. We meet at a school. There's a bit of turf outside the hall, and we've had some all-in soccer games, and I mean all-in. Think like 30 aside on the soccer game, all ages, all in. They talked about the working bee where we painted up the building and we did a whole lot of work. My daughter talked about how one of the young adults had taught her how to paint at the working bee. They talked about the meals we've shared. A bunch of people do something called Dinner with Friends, and they've enjoyed sharing meals with a whole bunch of different people. They talked about the hampers that the church prepares for families doing it tough that we give out through the school, and the way the whole faith community comes together to raise money, collect, shop, pack, and give out those. And they talked about the all-in music practice, where anybody of any ability, well, mostly any ability, can come together to learn some of the newer songs that we're going to be doing. It's not particularly what we were doing, it's the way we were doing it together. There's these memories, these fun things, these almost peak experiences that have come to create their feel, their link, their relationship to the faith community. And me as an adult, I'd have to say they're some of my favourite memories too. All right. I wish I could have heard all the stories that you were sharing. I'm sure it actually did your heart good to retell some of them. You know, those sorts of experiences, they often need someone to be intentional, who makes sure the invitation goes out. But just like a football game or a party or the dance floor at a wedding, people can't help but get involved and do things together. Like at the Working Bee, those who are older want to teach the kids how to do these things like painting. They're not programmed, but they make up the tapestry of your faith community. They set the temperature. And it actually doesn't matter if the whole church is there. It doesn't matter if it doesn't include everyone. It doesn't matter even if every generation is present. What matters is that there are some generations present. What matters is there are some people there. What matters is that one generation at least is connected to another. That's Netflix programming, not TV programming, because the little things add up. To move from the current form and shape of our faith communities, we're actually going to need a bridge from where we are and where we want to get to. And where you want to get to, it's not actually that you want particular programs. Where you want to get to is to be a community. A community that collaborates, a community that shares, a community that cares deeply for one another, a community that follows the ways and works and words of Jesus together. So I think of programs and initiatives kind of like bridges. They help us to get to where we want to go, but they're not the destination. Did you know that the average concrete bridge today is built to last around 75 years? Obviously, some last longer, but they often need an upgrade or a refit or some major repair before that 75 years is out. But there are bridges in the world that are over 500 years old, and they're not made of steel or concrete or bricks or even stone. They're made of the roots of trees. They're called living bridges. They are found at the base of the Himalayas in the Indian state of Meghalaya. This is one of the wettest regions in the world. The villages are isolated and mostly they don't have road access. So for centuries, the people have been shaping the environment around them and creating bridges over the many rivers and ravines that separate them. They actually use rubber fig trees. They plant tree saplings on either side of the river and they wait. And eventually the trees put out aerial roots, in which the bridge builders then coax across the river with the help of some bamboo scaffolding. And over the years, the aerial roots from one side of the river are pulled and woven to meet the roots from the other side. They merge together. And the trees add more roots and the villagers weave together those roots. And eventually the bridge reaches a critical strength, able to support pedestrians and all that they want to carry across. It's not a quick process, but it does produce a very strong, very stable, lasting bridge. In a place of hardship where the environment would wash away a standard bridge, these living bridges survive and thrive for centuries, creating connection. And that's actually what we need. We need living bridges, people woven together. It needs bridge builders. It needs some scaffolding like the bamboo. It needs people who want to see the church form an intergenerational community. But relational bridges are far, far stronger than any program-centric bridge we could ever hope to build. It's long-term work. It is not just a tweak. Caesar Kalinowski has a quite memorable phrase: "The kingdom advances at the speed of relationships." And this quote from John Pavlovitz struck me as well in his book, A Bigger Table, Building Messy, Authentic and Hopeful Spiritual Community. He says, "We easily forget that faith is a relational experience, that it's actually almost impossible to move into Christ-likeness without other souls to extend compassion and mercy and love to, or to receive those things from." So I'm wondering, as you think about your faith community, who can you see on the other side of the river, stretching out the roots, wanting to connect with another generation? I'm wondering which relationships you could weave together. Can you see those people in your mind? Can you imagine the living bridge you could create? Remember, we started at the very beginning with Acts 2, verse 42. And in my Bible, the heading of this passage is, the believers form a community. Not the believers start some programs. The believers form a community. And actually, verse 42 is a summary, which is why it's got all the ends. Here's what it says in verses 43 to 47. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miracles and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshipped together at the temple each day. They met in homes for the Lord's Supper and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. The early church, they made living bridges of relationship. Those bridges were so strong, and you and I have been able to walk into faith. So, if you want to form a community, if you want to become an intergenerational community, we're going to have to focus on more than the 2 hours over the weekend. We're going to have to tend to relationships, weave them together 168 hours a week. We've got to give that value. We've got to elevate that and give attention to all the ways we can do that. Thanks.